It is 8:10 on Wednesday evening as we sit down to record this episode of the Oh No 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 podcast, and I think we can now be fairly confident that, unlike Iain Murray, a narrow defeat in Airdrie hasn't cost Barry Robson his job. In other aspects, though, last night's 1-0 defeat shared a lot of similarities with that first game of the season. There was little to separate the sides, and a draw would have arguably been a better reflection of the overall match, but Airdrie ground out the result with a goal that the Rovers truthfully never looked like matching. I am Duncan Cameron, and joining me tonight to quickly put that one to bed and look ahead to Queen's Park's visit to Starks Park on Saturday, I have Scott Fleming. First of all, how are you, Scott?
Aye, not too bad, mate. I think last night, we've had another case of the Airdrie. I don't know what's going on in recent seasons, but especially at their stadium, they've definitely had a number. I mean, if we're in the same league as them next season, I'd be putting 1-0 on with my last fiver to Airdrie next season, because the last four have been the exact same.
Yeah, I genuinely started writing my intro as like death, taxes, and getting beat 1-0 at Airdrie. I honestly think I might have done literally that the last time we get beat 1-0 at Airdrie. We've also got Blair Hopcroft. How are you, Blair?
Very well, mate. Very well.
Good stuff. And we've got Iain Latto as well. How are you, Iain?
Yeah, I'm good. A real proverbial shrug off the shoulders game of football last night.
Meh.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah. Let's just stick to that point, because, as is always the case, anytime any football team gets beat, some people are up in arms and are losing their minds. I felt kind of the same as you, though. That kind of washed over me a little bit. Are we just better adjusted than other people, Iain? Or is that natural? On the back of 2 wins that, you take a loss like that?
I just think we're a mid-table championship team who has in and out form, and we were playing away midweek to a team who's in good form, and sometimes that results in a 1-0 loss. Like, I'm trying not to be like defeatist about it, but like genuinely, by the time I got back to the car, I bumped into a boy I know that's an Airdrie fan and his son. We were having a bit of chat on the way back to the car, and I got to the car and I was like, I'm not even arsed about that. Like, it was just a real shrug of the shoulders. Like, nobody wants to get beaten, and I was annoyed at the game that we ended up getting beaten, not getting a point. But like, these things happen when you're a mid-table side, and it happened. That's a bit the long and short of it, really.
Yeah, I think the thing for me is, like, if you didn't know any of the context and you just looked at where Airdrie are in the league and how many points they've got, you'd be quite kind of rightfully like, how the hell have you managed to lose that? Especially given we've been beaten there early in the season. But that Airdrie side are not a bottom of the league quality side.
No,
certainly based on the evidence what we've seen recently.
Definitely not. I put a tweet out at half time saying, like, this Airdrie side are like better than, and I think I listed, was it Queen's Park, Morton, Dunfermline, and
Accies,
yeah.
And like opposition fans of each of them seem to have some sort of alarm that went off that I'd tweeted that and flocked to the comments of the tweet to question my theory on it. But what I meant is that, like, this Airdrie side, as in the one that's not got 9 players injured, look fundamentally better than those other sides. And I stand by that, to be honest. I think if they'd had that squad available to them at the start of the season, they certainly wouldn't be in 10th. I don't think I've said much out of turn there. I particularly like the one Morton fan who jumped down my throat and said, "You've only said that because you've been beaten." And I was like, I tweeted it at half time when it was 0-0, but I digress.
Yeah, I mean, Blair, a fortnight ago, I think we all would have said Airdrie are relegated. Like, they're going to finish 10th. There's no other way about it. Based on kind of last night and what happened in Airdrie and what happened elsewhere, you still think they're stuck on to finish 10th, or is there an escape route there for them.
Oh, there's definitely light at the end of the tunnel for them, and it's triangular with a weird little house thing attached to it. Yeah, I mean, what's that them now? 7 points behind the Pars with a game, in, hand. And still to play them twice?
Still play them once, I think.
Just the once?
Either
way, they've got to fancy that. I mean,
yes, just once.
Just once. I was quite impressed with Airdrie, I have to say. Like, I've been going to the football way too long for the doom and gloom and misery that gets cast from the stands. And I find, like, I like to think I'm not an argumentative guy, but I think I might be quite an argumentative guy, because the more negative some folk get, the more rampantly positive I want to be. Some of the shouts last night, honestly, there was I hope he's listening. There was an old boy sat behind me who at one point said, "Cut out this continental pish and get the ball up the park." Right? By continental pish, I think he meant passing.
Which continent is that from?
No idea. And then he just proceeded to rip into Josh Mullen for 90 minutes. Every time Dylan Easton got the ball, it was, "Come on, you." I'm like, guys, come on. Can we no lose a game? Like, I think we genuinely went kind of toe-to-toe with a team who are, like, in a false position for me in the league. They're not, that team's not dead and buried 10th. And we're gonna, like Iain said, and I've been saying it for a few weeks now, we're a mid-table team. We're going to win some games. We're going to lose some games. But for me, I'll take that 1-0 defeat over the 3-1 at Dunfermline, over the 3-1 Dunfermline wasn't even as bad as the 3-0 at Airdrie and the loss at Falkirk earlier in the season. Like, there's ways to lose games. And last night for me just wasn't panic stations at all.
Yeah, I agree with you. Again, 3 or 4 weeks ago, I think would have said that there was a kind of blob in the bottom half of the division, that Airdrie were a little bit too poor to be part of, and Thistle were maybe a little bit too good to be part of, and I think that's just squashed down. And you really now just have a top 3 and a bottom 7. And the bottom 7 are all just much of a muchness. And it really, I mean, it looks like on form that Accies and Dunfermline are that little bit worse. But then you never know. It doesn't take long to turn form around. And
that's exactly it. Because that's what Airdrie have done. It's 3 or 4 games later and they're back in the mix. And 3 or 4 games ago, we were worried about 9th, and now we're thinking about 4th. And it's those fine margins, 3 or 4 games in a row, and you can climb this table.
And Scott, what Blair says there about a couple of games ago we were worried about 9th, now we're looking at 4th. Does last night change that equation, or where you sit on that optimism, pessimism?
Not overly. I mean, last night was kind of what I would say is almost kind of a bonus game, the fact that it was a game in hand for us. We're now, I mean, the last 2 weeks we've cut that gap between Partick from, it must have been about 8 or 9 points at one point, and it's now down to 4. So we've already basically halved that gap that was there before we played Partick. And I mean, to be fair, like, I think last night I would have been a bit more worried with that game last night had we not won the 2 home games. Because then you're actually then closer to the bottom lot. And that's when, I can see why people would be more worried and panicking at the fact that we're kind of getting dragged into that. But now that we've beat Hamilton, we've beat Partick, so we've beat 2 teams that are in and around us. I know that Partick are obviously 4th now, but Accies are in and around us. They went and beat the Pars last night. So actually now, because of the results in the last 2 weeks, it's actually like the Pars that have been really dragged back into the mess down the bottom, because Airdrie, I know it's, 7 points are now behind the Pars?
Yeah.
And I think they've got a game in hand on that as well. Like, that, the way they played last night, I said to, I think it was my dad I was speaking to before on Sunday, I said, because he was like, oh, it should be 6 points this week. I went, I'm not so sure. Airdrie, we know anyway a record at Airdrie, but also Airdrie had picked up form, they'd looked decent, they'd got guys back for injury, and I was like, I would take a point right now. This was on Sunday. And for most of the game, it was kind of looking that way. I was like, to be honest, I'll take 4 points if it means we go and beat Queen's Park. And that also means that we get further away from Queen's Park as well. But, aye, we didn't win the game last night, but I also wasn't overly surprised that it was a close game and that there wasn't much in it, because Airdrie are a decent footballing side, especially at their own stadium as well. But, yeah, I'm certainly not worried about going forward where we are. We've got 11 games to go, still a game in hand on pretty much everybody around us in terms of Aki's, the Pars, Partick. We've got a game in hand on all of them. And it's against Morton. So it's still in our own hands to kind of go and catch Partick, to be honest.
That, I think, was one of the reasons why I wasn't, like, overly... Not that I wasn't bothered, but, like, you know, I wasn't kicking seats and stuff last night, because although losing that game to Airdrie does make kind of getting fourth place a little bit more difficult, you know, compared to winning it, I don't think we finished last night any more likely to finish ninth. You know, if anything, it's one more round the fixtures gone, and we're still 9 points ahead of Dunfermline, who are ninth. And I don't know, like, shooting to finish fourth still feels like such a bonus to me that I find it very difficult to get worked up about the prospect of missing it. Like,
I said
given the
same
season
thing.
that we've had.
I said the same thing last night in another group chat that I'm in. I think one of them went, "Oh, this is great." I was at full time. "Oh, this is great." Back to losing to Airdrie again, and now fourth is kind of off the table. I went, "Well, see, at the starting of December when everybody was greeting about relegation, would you know a taking fifth? Like, I'd have bitten your hand off for fifth in December."
I know
I was
multiple people.
To be fair, I was one of the ones that was fearing relegation most, I think, on this podcast at one point when we had just got scudded off Falkirk. But the turnaround in terms of, we got a couple of results in December, especially at home. We've then went and got a couple of results again at home. Our home record's the reason that we're in fifth. Because if it was anything to do with the away record, we would be 9th or 10th.
Iain, you were going to come in there?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I know multiple people that have said multiple times this season, "I'd bite your hand off right now for 8th. So the fact that we're getting towards the kind of crunch end of the season and we're, 4 behind 4th with a game in hand. Come on, boys.
It's like the N-1 rule, though, isn't it? No matter what place they're in, they should be one place higher. They just like if you're in 4th, why are they not in 3rd? Really, why are they not in 3rd?
And I think, I mean, again, to go back to the point that the bottom 7 teams in the division are all kind of much of a muchness at this point. Like, one of them is going to finish in the playoffs, and the 4 teams below them are going to look at it as a missed opportunity.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, as I say, you could probably now, right, Airdrie are too far away to be in that question, right? So no matter how well they do now, they're fine. Dunfermline and Hamilton categorically just need to avoid relegation. But I think from basically this point on, us, Morton, Queen's Park, Thistle, one of those 4 teams is going to go into the playoffs, and the other 3 are going to say, that should have been us. But ultimately, are any of those sides, including us, actually a sort of playoff level side?
No,
it's not. You're making up numbers. Like, I mean, it's really, what if one of those 4 teams gets promoted? Like, I'll give the money myself. Like, that's it's not going to happen, is it?
But there's pros and cons as well to finish in 4th. Like, obviously the money, the prize money, and you get an extra 2 games, so you've got an extra bit of gate money coming in as well. So that pads the coffers a little bit, which is a bonus, which is always good. Prize
Sell a
money's
lot of
better.
T-shirts as well.
Sell a lot of T-shirts, yeah. So do we, to be fair. That's a good idea. But you also do your business that little bit later. Like, there's that thing about, you know, the teams that, like Ayr, for example. I've no doubt that the reason that Ayr strengthened the way that they did is because they weren't in the playoffs last year. They got their business done that little bit earlier because they had nothing else to do other than watch us make a run at it. So yeah, there's pros and cons. Finishing 4th, you're right. It just feels like a pat on the back for a job well done. But do you really think we're going to go on and win 6 games on the bounce and get ourselves promoted into the Premier League? Like,
It's not like, it would be a boon for Barry Robson. Like, it would be a big, big thing for him, because he can very clearly go, well, before I arrived, this was a team effectively hovering about a relegation battle, maybe, and I've made them a playoff team. So imagine I'd had a full season. So he'd have every right to feel very good about that, and so would we, to be fair. We'd piggyback on that, no bother at all. But over the course of the season, as I say, I think it's just a funny way the division's split, really, that you've got that top three sort of bottom seven.
It just reminded me as well of McGlynn's first season. He came in, we were nowhere near anything, and then he got us to the playoffs. It was at Stirling we ended up playing in the playoffs the first time round. They absolutely pumped us. But like, it was one of those things, and you kind of go, oh well, if he'd had a full season, you never know. And then he got to the playoffs again, and we still never got up. But, you know,
because I mean, that's just the thing. Like if in whatever it is, 9 weeks time, 10 weeks time, if we're in the playoffs, the tune will be very different. It will be a case of like, you know, whatever's happened. It doesn't matter now. It's 2 games, and then it's another 2 games, and then it's only another 2 games. You're in the Premier League. Silliness, but I can't even remember what the original point was there. But it's there's no sense being too downhearted after last night. I don't think it really changes anything. It's not a case of you've gone to the team who are rooted bottom of the league and lost. Although that is fundamentally true, it doesn't kind of tell the full story. To move into the game itself a little bit, so the Rovers, as I think we suspected, were unchanged for the third game on the spin. Again, I think it was pretty predictable for reasons that we'll probably come on to as we start looking ahead to Saturday. And we'll talk about subs in a little bit as well. But the Rovers kind of struggled to settle a little bit in this one. Blair, how much credit are you willing to extend to Rhys McCabe for that?
A lot, actually. So I said when Collins left, I did say that I'd still have taken McCabe. I know they were in a bit of a mess at that point, and I'd kind of made the point that actually now is maybe the time to go and get him, because like he might have been a bit cheaper. I was really impressed with the tactics last night. We've obviously become, under Barry Robson, this side who want to come out and press and want to hit you hard and quite early as well, actually. It's kind of something that we've done. And not only did he kind of go quite quick with the press himself off the bat and kind of caught us on the back foot, they just seemed to sit so deep last night. Like, try and get in behind us because there's no space. And he just refused to budge. And it was one of the games where he just found a way to nullify us a little bit, actually. And it basically came down to, can you play through us? And no, we couldn't. So yeah, I think Rhys McCabe deserves a lot of credit, actually. I think tactically, and again, I don't necessarily think it's one of them where you go, oh, he's absolutely won the tactical battle. Like, he's a bit like when I said Barry Robson did the same thing at McGlynn at Falkirk in the Scottish. Like, he's cancelled us out. I don't think he's necessarily set them up in a way to win a game. It was like for me, it was like, I'm going to stay in the game. If we can get to 70 minutes, we're going for you. Like, we are coming for you at 70 minutes. But up until then, we're just going to sit in and kind of just manage the game. I thought he did a really, really, really good job at it.
Yeah, I know what you mean. He didn't sort of completely nullify everything we were trying to do and sort of totally dominate the game. But what he did do, which neither Hamilton or Airdrie or Thistle managed, was make it a game. Yeah. Like, it was a back and forth. And I mean, in the early stages, there's a couple of chances really that, I mean, Airdrie are having the better of it very early on. There's a lovely little bit of football from is it Chris Mockery? I haven't written his first name down. I don't know what it is. Where he's got a lovely little kind of turn and he plays Ben Wilson through, and then Josh Ray has to be out very, very quickly to the point where I think he actually meets him outside the box to get the block on that. This is a very interesting game where I think an early goal could have changed the whole thing entirely for either side, and it did end up being that, just kind of cancelling each other out. But yeah, more than anything, I think Airdrie did strike me as just very disciplined and very organised in a way that you don't sort of expect from a team that's bottom of the league, to go back to that sort of recurring theme. And we've said that they're 7 points behind Dunfermline, they've got a game in hand. Now their game in hand is against Falkirk. So you'd think, all right, top versus bottom, how much is that game in hand really worth? But Airdrie will give Falkirk a game at home.
Well,
With that, it's not going to be, first quarter Airdrie who were getting run over the top by everybody except us. They'll give everybody a game from now till the end of the season on that basis. And I think Rhys McCabe's whole thing for most of the season up to this point has been about getting players back. And is it Aidan Wilson, the defender, came back in last night, having been missing for months and months. Hadn't played a minute, went right in from the start. And I don't think anybody of a Rovers persuasion, unless they're very clued up on that, kind of noticed until after the fact. It was only when that you're kind of looking at it and it's like, actually, he hasn't played any football at all. You never would have guessed. And the one who really stood out for me was Alex Bannon.
Yeah.
They've got on loan from Burton Albion, was at Queen's Park previously. So he absolutely strolled at centre half.
Very good.
He got man of the match in the ground, and I would find it very difficult to argue with that. Scott, for yourself, kind of early stages, were you concerned with what you were seeing, or were you content just to let the game settle and see how it played out?
I think for maybe the first 10-15 minutes, I wasn't really best pleased with how we'd started, but I thought once we kind of withered, obviously that you had that save where Josh Ray rushed out and managed to block it, and it was a really good save at the time, and that was only after I think 5 minutes or something. But Airdrie had another couple of half chances, or just getting kind of pinning us back sort of thing. And I was like, well, we really need to sort of get a foothold in this game. Otherwise, if they score early, we've seen it plenty of times where they get a goal and then just go, right, you need to come and beat us now. And we didn't. So I think, once we got past that first 15 minutes, I thought we played okay the rest of the first half, but without really, again, it was a story of the game, without really creating any clear-cut chances. I know somebody tried to correct me on social media by saying we had 0 clear-cut chances, but I mean, I thought Gullens was a pretty decent chance. It was very similar to Airdrie's goal, for instance. It was maybe slightly closer than the actual goal itself, but it was the fact that he's just went to sort of whip it and curl it into the bottom corner, and he's just in the end not had enough. I mean, I think Ray TV were claiming that Kieran Wright, the way that he was kind of running across it as if he had it covered anyway. You never know unless it's on target to see if he actually does save it or not. But I think, once we got past that 15 minutes, I thought we definitely kind of played a few decent passes and just started to get a foothold in the game. But I definitely think had Airdrie got that first goal really early, I was a wee bit worried that we probably wouldn't have got anything back out of it.
I think it's an interesting thing there. So somebody saying that the Rovers didn't have any chances, and when I saw the highlights were 10 minutes long, I was staggered. But then actually the highlights are, for both teams, a succession of chances that all of them are almost half chances.
Yeah.
There's maybe 20 almost half chances across that whole game. And actually, every single highlight, you're like, oh, I could see how this could have become a goal. It definitely didn't, and didn't really come that close. But you could see where it would potentially come from.
Just wouldn't have landed.
That's it. And I think I can't imagine that Rhys McCabe went in after that game and was like, oh, we played brilliantly. That was exactly what we set out to do. He'll be delighted that they got the win, of course, and as well he should do. But I think both teams were just a little bit disjointed, a little bit not quite as fluid as they would want to be. Iain, it looked to me like the Rovers' sort of main plan of attack seemed to be sort of Josh Mullen trying to kind of knock the ball around the corner for Finlay Pollock to chase onto. I think that was by design, or was that the only player the Rovers were getting a bit of opportunity?
I think it's obviously what our main tactic's been. It's on the side that Pollock's on. Pollock is obviously like the quicker of the two with him and Gullen. I think the idea was trying to kind of get the ball from Mullen, whose obviously distribution is excellent, clipped into that channel between the left back. Was it Strap? Strap was left back, and the left sided centre half. And to be fair, it did work once. Pollock got turned, and he's actually unlucky in that. I think Gullen's running offside as he's looking to cross the ball.
Yes.
And he's waiting as if to say, go and get back on side. And he waits and waits and waits, and then eventually has to cut back, and then the cross gets deflected just into the goalie's arms. But I think once we'd tried it 5 times, and it had worked once, and then we tried it another 5 times, it kind of became quite frustrating, quite predictable, and quite laboured. And then Airdrie are obviously wise to it. And I don't think we were likely to kind of get much from that. In terms of the players, I thought the players looked a bit leggy going into the kind of second half. A lot of shouts in the stand about when are we getting the subs on. I'm sure we'll kind of go on to that. I don't know what I think about it really. Like we've got limited options on the bench. Do you know what I mean? Like, and it's. If make it like, yes, you can make a sub and yes, you can freshen it up. It doesn't mean you're going to get better. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't always mean that it's going to be a positive change. That you can make a sub and it can get worse. Yeah, I don't know if we'll maybe see a few changes for Saturday. I imagine so.
So that's the next thing I've got in my notes actually is that Airdrie made 2 changes after 55, 56 minutes, and it was 20 minutes after that before the Rovers made changes. But it is difficult with the system that we're playing to kind of make changes almost. Or it's not difficult to do it, but like I think the sort of cliche-driven headline, if you wanted one, would be like, oh, Robson doesn't trust his bench. He's not using his subs because he doesn't trust his subs. But I don't think it's trust necessarily, as the system that he's using, there's quite a lot of guys who only really one of them fits the bill. So like Mullen, for example, if you wanted to sub him, you don't have a replacement in a kind of natural sense. You have to go with Connolly, who you're then asking someone to play effectively as a wing back on their weaker foot, which is very different from playing in that kind of wing role that he would do naturally, albeit it's on the same side. Stevenson on the other side, again, you just don't have a replacement for. Easton is one who is subbed, but Kai Montague, with the greatest of respect to him, isn't Dylan Easton at this point in his career. Like, that's a big change. That's a big decision to make. And I mean, I think like when you see the sub that's made, the double sub after 76 minutes, it's basically the only sub you've got is pulling the trigger on Montague for Easton and putting Marsh on. And I think, to be honest, you could toss a coin whether you're putting on for Pollock or Gullen. Blair, is that a weakness almost that's just built into this system that Barry Robson favours, and we're just going to have to accept, given that it's been successful in the last 2 games?
Probably is, actually. When you frame it that way, it probably is, except for the fact that the system seems to be working. That's the kind of overriding positive is, if it ain't broke, you don't fix it. But then it's that thing of, you've got 3 games in a week, so how do you freshen things up? The only option he's really got is to change the system, and I can't see him doing it for the simple reason that the system is actually, it is bringing the best out of some of the players that we have. He's getting more of a tune. I keep saying this, he's getting more of a tune out of that squad than the previous 3 sets of managers. In terms of results aside, actually just performances and kind of play, he's getting a better tune out of them. So, he did obviously change the system when he made the final substitution, when he brought Connolly on, which was 81, 82 minutes, something like that. And he changed to a back four and kind of pushed Montague out wide left, it looked like, which I don't, again, think was what he wanted to do with Montague, but at that point, you've kind of got to roll the dice a little bit and go for it. So I suppose it is a weakness in terms of that there is definitely a limitation there. I don't think for a second that he is desperate for Josh Mullen to be playing right wing back, for example. I don't think he's the natural, best player we can have in that position. He's doing a good job, like no disrespect to him at all. He is genuinely he's doing way better. We were laughing last night, and I'm sure we've talked about this in the show, about like if you told me last year that we'd be on our third manager and Josh Mullen would be playing right wing back, I would think we were sitting 10th in the league. Like something like the world has gone to shit at this point. But it's not, and it's working and it's fine, but it doesn't have an awful lot of change. And I don't see Connolly doing that job as much as he'll work hard. If Mullen's getting targeted because he can't header a ball, you didn't replace him with somebody that's 5'4". Like, it just doesn't work. It doesn't make any sense. So, yeah, I'm not really sure where he kind of goes. And, like, it's that thing. I'm trying to scribble down a starting lineup for what I want to do on Saturday. And as much as I agree, Iain, with what you're saying about changes coming, I can't think of any. Like,
I think I've got one for what it's worth, but
yeah,
we'll get to it.
Yeah, I'm struggling.
That's the thing, really, is, I mean, you've basically got two first team championship level centre halves on the bench.
Yeah.
Murray and Fordyce actually would swap into that team. Like, they would be the least disruption, and that's just the one that we didn't need. That's where potentially, had we managed to take the lead in that game, and we were seeing it out, you actually get these guys on, it's fresh legs, they'll help us see the game out. But I would be with the greatest respect to them, Callum Fordyce and Ewan Murray are not guys you're going to put on to try and get you over the top to win a game. Yeah. And that's, again, even like Lewis Gibson would have been an option to have in there before you even get into the three strikers that we've been missing for a good long time now. Scott, setting aside the rightness or wrongness of making the subs, do you think that was a significant factor in the sort of pattern of that second half? The fact that Airdrie had fresh legs on kind of 20 minutes before we did?
I mean, you could say that, because obviously Airdrie also had a game at the weekend, so it wasn't like they came into the game not playing just a few days ago like we did. I think the thing that's, for me, that's a little bit that no matter if it's working, I get it's hard to change something if it is working, but I think because we've got another midweek game next week, we can't just keep going to these guys and saying, look, just keep playing 80 minutes or more, because like at the end of the day, they're going to be knackered by the Livy game next week, and then I think we're playing again the following Saturday, the Saturday after the Livy game. So I think you're going to have to, at one point, potentially either change for one game, just change it to kind of give yourself fresh legs in one game, or you go with it from the start and then say to yourself, after 60 minutes, we are going to change this. Even if it's 0-0, we need to just get fresh legs on, because at the end of the day, Airdrie definitely got a bit of a lift when some of the guys were coming on, like Zadiak and I'm trying to remember the boy in midfield that came on, but
McGrattan.
The boy scored that. They two definitely just gave them a little bit extra life again, because I thought actually the game in general kind of hit a bit of a lull in the middle of the second half, and it was at that point everybody started saying, "Oh, it's going to take one goal to just win this game, but is it going to come?" Because the fact that it was just like, well, both of us have had half chances the full game. Nobody's really taken the game by the scruff of the neck. So it was going to take a goal like it was to win the game. So I don't think... well, I was about to say the subs didn't win the game, but technically they did on paper for Airdrie.
It's funny, I was thinking exactly the same thing.
But, like, it was just the way that obviously it's fallen to the boy at the edge of the box that came on, but it could have been Ben Wilson for all weekend, the striker that started the game, because he's the one that's been scoring goals for them in recent games and kind of came into form. But yeah, I think going forward, especially for Saturday, I think even just we were talking about it there about like what changes you would make. I think I've got 2 or 3 that I've made, but still going with the same system. They're the only 2 or 3 that you could still kind of make with that system. Just because I think Barry Robson, as we've all said and agreed, that this is the system he's favoured, this is a system that's worked, and especially at home it's worked as well. So I just don't see him changing. But I do think going forward, we need to be, in the next week or two, be making more subs just for the guys in general.
There's actually, I was just going to say, there was one thing you said, Scott, that wasn't right, actually. After the Livingston game, we don't have a game on the Saturday because it's meant to be Livingston on the Saturday. It's been brought forward to that Wednesday. So we don't actually play again until the following Friday. So there's like a 9-day window. So if you can get through Saturday and get through Wednesday, you've got 9 days, boys. You can rest up. Like
I completely forgot that was Scottish Cup weekend, actually. Yeah. So fair enough then, yeah.
That 9-day window before a game has got Lewis Vaughan return written all over it, by the way.
Aye, and the 9-day is in the bars as well.
It's actually got Lewis Vaughan knocking training written all over it.
Well, yeah. I preferred mine.
Yeah. Me too.
The number of games obviously makes it difficult, but it's also, I mean, Barry Robson very clearly, it's a very high energy, high effort style of football as well, which does it just. And as I say, a few weeks back, I was asking for Barry Robson to play, the same system for games in a row. I'm not going to go back on that now. I'm not criticising him for that at all, but it is just an unfortunate side effect that in the system we don't have a lot of replacements. I mean, I think Easton is one who's very clearly being managed, because actually a lot of the time this season nothing would get Dylan Easton off the park. He'd play 90 minutes every single week, and actually it's now at the point where you're like, well, Kai Montague's there, I can at least rest Dylan Easton for 10 minutes. And
it's just a few that there's a replacement for.
Yeah, there just isn't that same option for other guys out there. It seemed to me last night that we seemed to get to about the 60, 65 minute mark and get very, very tired all of a sudden. Almost, it was like the whole team seemed to kind of tire as one. And as I say, Scott, when you said there about the subs didn't change the game, apart from the guy who scored the winner, I honestly was thinking exactly the same thing, because when you're talking like this about, our team was getting tired and then they put subs on, but it wasn't like they put on a flying machine on the wing who was then running us ragged or anything. The sort of energy of the game didn't really change, but it seemed to just move 20 yards closer to our goal after about the hour mark. It stopped being that kind of back and forth. You almost have a chance. We almost have a chance. And even on the highlights, it's Airdrie almost have a chance. Airdrie almost have a chance. Airdrie almost have a chance. Airdrie got a goal. And it just kind of all of a sudden started to feel not necessarily inevitable, but 10, 15 minutes before that, we were saying, first goal's going to win this. Who's it going to go to? By 65, 70 minutes, you're like, if Airdrie can get a goal here, they're going to win this, or it'll be 0-0. The Rovers just seem to kind of drop off at that point. And then Airdrie do get their goal, as you said. So Lewis McGrattan came off the bench. I don't know whether this is tiredness, this is just kind of switching off, could have happened at any point, or if there's other kind of mitigation in this, but it's Airdrie sort of breaking through the middle. The Rovers are sort of chasing back, trying to cover men and trying to cover space, and McGrattan ends up with more time than you would ideally want anybody to have on the edge of the D, and he gets a good shot away past Josh Ray. Iain, if we are pointing fingers, and we are, where are you apportioning your blame in this. If indeed we agree that, like all goals, it's preventable to some degree.
Yeah. It's a difficult one because when the ball goes out to the right-hand side for Airdrie, Stevenson gets squared up. And I think Stevenson had quite a bad knock where it looked like he was down for a fair bit not long before that. So Matthews, who's obviously playing on that side of the midfield, has McGrattan at the start of the move. But when he sees that Stevenson is getting squared up 1v1, he makes a move to go out to then be like, if he gets inside of him, he's going to have a free shot to kind of like whip that into the back post or have a go. So he goes across it, and as he moves over, Montague's just kind of standing in no man's land and doesn't have like the experience or doesn't notice that Matthews has left his man, and he just kind of remains in no man's land for the duration. And if you're watching the highlights, have a pause at 7 minutes 53. Just as the ball lands at Lewis McGrattan's feet, there are 8 Wraith Rovers players in shot. There's 4 Airdrie players in shot, and McGrattan's not got a Rovers player within about 10 yards radius of him. Brown follows his man, who kind of ends up behind Liam Dick somehow. Matthews obviously goes to cover and gets taken out by the pass, and Montague's standing behind McGrattan. So it's difficult to apportion all of the blame onto Montague, and that's not what I'm doing. I'm just saying that, like, you know, if you've got a perhaps slightly more experienced player in there who notices that Matthews has got to go and try and double up on the winger, the centre midfielder there picks up McGrattan, and he probably doesn't have that level of space. Great finish for McGrattan, by the way. I thought it was great feet. The ball is zipped into him. He's got like one touch on his left foot, a tiny wee touch on his right foot to just set it out very slightly, and then he bends the ball kind of outside the post. Josh Ray gets over really well. You know what I mean? He dives like beyond the post. It's not as if he's like not quite made it. It's just the power of the shot is so good it goes past him. Good goal from Airdrie from their perspective, but yeah, a few little wee failings that I imagine the players have sat and gone through. John McGlynn laser pen style today.
Yeah, it's I'll tell you what I think about it in a second. Blair, do you agree with that? The Matthews Montague blame matrix?
No. Kind of. Although I still think that Iain's description's absolutely perfect, except for that when Iain says Matthews left his man, he just keeps talking, and then no, like he left his man. Like, and for me, that's the cardinal sin. I think you're right. Montague probably needs to switch on and needs to come in. But for me, Matthews overdoes the going to support Stevenson. He ends up going way too far. He doesn't. If the boy beats Stevenson, he's going to have to come inside. For me, all Matthews has to do is split the difference between McGrattan and Stevenson effectively and hover in that space. If the ball then makes the pass, which is what he does, he's already kind of halfway to McGrattan and he can go and close him down. I just think it was kind of like when you said, Duncan, about the energy of the game didn't change. I agree to an extent. I think Airdrie did up the pace a little bit. I don't think it was enough that it was kind of hugely like influential in the game, but we just seemed to lose our discipline all over the place, and that I do think was down to Montague and Marsh coming in. There was a short corner, like I think it's like 2 clips before it maybe, in the highlight reel, and Stevenson goes out for the short corner and nobody goes with him, and he's doing his dinger, he's turning around, and it's Montague, he's sleeping, he's just not paying attention at all, and the build up to that goal, Montague is so far forward because he just goes running and chasing down somebody, kind of out of nowhere, kind of not really chasing it, and kind of 2-hand shoves somebody and turns around and is chasing back, kind of thing. We just lost all kind of discipline, I felt. But yeah, I thought, I actually, I mean, I said in the group chat earlier on first view, and I thought it was Brown. I'm like, where the hell is Brown going? What is he doing? And actually, when you watch it, he is just tracking his man. But for me, Matthews, yeah, he kind of sold it a little bit for me.
So I agree with you on this. on the kind of balance of it. I am more inclined to say, in hindsight, to be fair,
Yeah.
I think the greater danger for Matthews is McGrath.
Yeah.
If the guy who, I'm afraid that I don't know who it is, the playing on that right wing for Airdrie at that point, he does, as you say, Ian, he does square up Stevenson and he's coming inside. He's going to have to do very, very well for himself for that to be the kind of biggest danger point almost, that he gets that slight run on Stevenson that can only be countered by Matthews coming across. Montague's not going to enjoy that video session regardless, because at the key point he just stops. Because actually, I was running it back there, Ian, as you were explaining it, and I was going through, and at a certain point I was going to say, well, actually Montague goes to cover the same run that Matthews does, and he kind of bends his run that way and then just slows down. Yeah, it's kind of, if you're going to go to the man or go to the ball, if he at least does it at full speed, he'll get less of a ball looking off his gaffer, I'm sure. It's obviously all it's split second decisions and all that kind of stuff. I think on balance, if you're running it back, you watch it in slow motion, the way that goal doesn't happen, at least not in the same way, as if Matthews stays with his man. Now, if that means that the winger gets a skip on Stevenson and bends it into the top corner, then almost kind of fair enough, I suppose. I think we have made it slightly easier for them than Barry Robson would have liked. Scott, what do you think? Are you picking a side in this argument?
Yeah, well, to be fair, I was kind of the same in terms of watching the game live. I wondered why Bruni had kind of followed into the box and ended up so deep. But then watching the highlights again, I was like, well, I suppose the guy he's kind of tracking goes beyond him and beyond the defence. So he's probably decided to make that decision of, well, I'm just going to follow the guy that I'm tracking anyway. And then at the end of the day, if something comes from it, he goes, well, I was tracking my man. So, but I do agree that I think it's probably a split between Matthews and Montague overall. I think the two of them have not really chosen the correct thing to do between them. But at the same time, I do think that Montague is still so young and so inexperienced in terms of game sort of time. And what's he, 17, 18 years old? He's 18 now, first season in pro football. I don't think these sort of things are that he'll pick up and he'll learn. And this is stuff that Barry Robson will probably be happy to coach into him, is just, look, just keep switched on and I'll teach you what you need to know. Because at the end of the day, that sort of thing that happened, that's the sort of thing that Barry Robson probably in his career was pretty good at, is sort of sensing danger and trying to block shots and get involved in that sort of area of the pitch. So I think if he wants to learn the defensive side of things, Montague, he's got a guy that played for Celtic and got capped at international level for a reason, because he was decent in that position. So, and put it this way, I actually even think that somebody like Dylan Easton could easily switched off in a position like that.
I was just going to say the same thing.
When it comes to a defensive sort of standpoint, there's been times throughout this season that Dylan Easton switched off or made a mistake, whereas at the other end of the pitch is where he does his business. So, and that's where Kai Montague in the future is likely to do his business as well, is further up the park. But he does need to just eventually learn he's got to do his bit at the other end as well.
I do wonder as well. I was going to say, I wonder how much Robson will look at that scenario and actually how much of blame's probably the wrong word. It feels like a negative, but you know what I mean. But how much he'll credit to Scott Brown in the sense of he should have passed him on. Probably shouldn't be following that man effectively into nowhere. Do you know what I mean? Actually holding that position and that job in front of the centre halves and kind of marshalling that area of the park is probably where he should have been. But I was never a centre midfielder, so I've got no clue. Maybe he's Maybe he's meant to follow his runner. Who knows?
It's largely because very little else happened that we've kind of
totally.
broken that down in the amount of detail that we have there. To be perfectly honest, but I did think it was interesting because you can look at different people through that entire move and go, if only you'd done this, if only you'd done that. But that's the nature of football. As I said at the start there's very few goals that are completely unpreventable. And if you start going through it actually would be really interesting to hear what is the actual answer. If you are the guys who get paid to do this, what side are they coming down on? And I'm sure there'll still be disagreements about it. But very much the defining moment in the game, obviously, as you would expect in a 1-0 win. Couple of, again, not quite half chances for the Rovers after that. There's a nice little turn of pace from Jordan Dockery, to be fair, down in the right wing at one point after we'd gone to the sort of 4 at the back, and he was still kind of pushing on from there. Kieran Wright, I think, sort of overextends himself a little bit and gets a fist to the ball. Aidan Marsh, I don't think, does anything wrong, but it's a very, very busy penalty box, and the shot is blocked. I think he's on his weaker foot as well. Possibly the slightly more frustrating one is we load the box for a long throw, and Paul Hanlon gets a good header on it. Iain, I know you were a little bit put out by this one, the way it went.
Aye. It's the last minute. Dicko's done well to steal a good few yards at the throw-in, much to the annoyance of the Airdrie fans that are right behind him, who are letting him know exactly what they think about it. And I feel like Dicko's throw's getting better as well. I remember thinking when he started this, he's got one of them fake long throws that kind of makes like the start of the 6-yard box, where it looks like he's going to throw it long and then he tries his hardest and he doesn't really, but he's definitely getting better at it. On this occasion, he throws it right onto Hanlon's head, who gets up between 2 Airdrie defenders and flicks it onto precisely where you want him to flick it onto. And there's like 3 Rovers players making the same run 4 yards in behind him. Meanwhile, there's this bloody huge space at the back post. Nobody's there, and Kieran Wright just mops it up. It's one of those, like, one player needs to hang at the back there and anticipate the flick on for the only place where it can go where we can score a goal. Like, Hanlon's not going to get up and flick that down the way. And, you know what I mean? It's not possible to do it. He's only going to help it on and, like, re-divert it to the back post. You've got to think that someone's going to gamble there. But other than that, like, I've got in my notes here, and I actually think it was before the Airdrie goal, Dylan Easton slips a ball into Jamie Gullen, and he's between the centre halves.
So
I've actually got that's our best chance of the game, and the ball didn't make it into the box.
Yeah,
Like, it's one of those.
He was inches away though. Like, had he got his toe on
touch,
because
he
the
takes a
keepers
better
come
touch.
flying out as well, and almost
Yeah.
gambles on him not getting the touch. The keeper
Yeah,
actually has to. You have to give him credit for reading that perfectly in the end.
Yeah.
I think if Gullen gets a toe on it, it could be one of those ones where the ball goes round one side and he goes round the other and rolls it into an empty net, because Wright's totally committed to coming for it. But yeah,
That
other
is
than
literally like a minute and a half before they score. Like,
I knew it was
they
before, but
they break up and they've got the short corner that I was talking about, and then they get there's the 2 saves from Ray, and then the goal scored. Because like Duncan said, it was like chance, goal. Like, but that was just before that. Really frustrating.
But other than that, it's not as if we were like knocking on the door or that, you know. Frustrating that the Hanlon one especially.
That's it. It's that, as I've said, was really the kind of story of the game. Lots of chances where you go, I can see how that could have been a goal on another night in another universe. You can see how that move leads to a goal, and there's 12 for both teams across the course of the evening. But just never really came to anything. And it's another one, not had one for a couple of weeks, but it's another one of these games where you go, yeah, it's a side that's missing 3 strikers.
Yeah.
Like, just didn't really have the plan B, couldn't make plan A work well enough.
It's immeasurably better than the last 1-0 defeat at Airdrie, though, where we had one shot on goal and it was in the 90th minute and it was a trickler to the goalkeeper's feet. Like, last night, had we nicked a goal before they scored, or had we nicked an equaliser, you wouldn't be going, oh my God, that's daylight robbery. How on earth have we managed to get away with that? Like, whereas at Airdrie, the first game of the season, like, we were stinking the place up.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, as I say, I think both games sort of should have been 0-0s by rights.
Yeah,
but
probably.
by the same token, I don't think you could argue that Airdrie weren't the more likely in both games. You know, if somebody had to win it, it should have been Airdrie both times.
Yeah, that's fair.
But 6 points to 0, not sort of a fair balance on the two games. But that's the way it goes. Right, any final thoughts before we leave Airdrie behind?
I think we've done incredibly well to get an hour out of that, to be honest.
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought the referee was particularly pish as well. But
all I was going to say is
that
I thought that for the first time, obviously, that he got tested, I thought Josh Ray actually had a good game last night.
Yeah.
Because he's had 2 games where he's literally just watched the game like the fans have. So I think he's done really well in terms of right at the start, switched on because the defence when he switched on at the start. And then again, he had that double save just before the goal as well. That again, he's made 2 really good stops there. He's unlucky that the goal, it's a good finish. I mean, I think even Dabrowski's probably struggling even at his height to stretch and save that. I mean, it's one of them saves that you maybe go, Kev does make a miraculous save, but at the end of the day, no, I don't think you can be blaming Ray for that goal.
Yeah. Nah, I agree with you. Right, let's have a quick break and we'll come back to talk about Queen's Park. Blair,
Yes, mate.
you're a man
Yes.
and you have thoughts and feelings and emotions.
Yes.
Are you good at talking about all that stuff?
Well, I try my best, but I don't know. Probably not as much as I should.
I'm the same. I feel better after getting stuff like that off my chest, but I don't do it anywhere near often enough. Have you heard about Andy's Man Club?
They're brilliant. They create a safe space for men to sit down and talk about the important stuff. And they do it right across the country as well.
Yeah, exactly. They've got more than 200 meetings across the UK, and it's every Monday night at 7 o'clock, including one at Starks Park.
And if anyone wants more information on it, they can go to andysmanclub.co.uk or search for Andy's Man Club on Facebook. It's okay to talk, and now we're going to get back to talking about the Rovers.
Queen's Park come to Starks Park on Saturday in fairly shaky form. So league losses to Morton, Airdrie and Hamilton were followed up by a 0-0 draw with Dunfermline at the weekend there. And, I mean, you can't help but feel that the knives would maybe be out for Callum Davidson at this point, if it wasn't for the fact that they beat Rangers at Ibrox in the Scottish Cup. To very briefly just go back to our chat at the start about the big blob of teams in the bottom half of the table. Iain, is this another one of these sort of season-defining type games, or a six-pointer in the try to get to one playoff and stay out the other one stakes?
I think the majority of games in this league now, between now and the end of the season, are going to feel like that, because basically any time any team in the bottom 7 plays another team in the bottom 7, they're all going to feel like it's a massive game. Queen's Park are a funny one, eh? Really funny, really, really funny side. You touched on it just there. Had a bad kind of championship season, but the win at Ibrox buys so much good faith. Do you know what I mean? In terms of yeah, well, there is that as well. But like, it's one of those where if Queen's Park lose on Saturday, let's say, and they get beat 3-0 at Starks Park and they sack Callum Davidson at full time, the whole of the Scottish football media, Twitter, all of those circles are like, they just beat Rangers at Ibrox, what's going on? Without much real like depth of thought for how poor they've been in the championship.
Which is exactly what happened when Callum Davidson was sacked by St Johnstone.
It is. He's really found his
Double-winning
niche.
manager, and he's garbage in every other competition we enter.
I mean, for instance,
Yeah.
he's done better than any Rangers manager in recent years.
He's beat both Rangers. He beat the B in the Challenge Cup, and then he beat
Oh,
the big
Blair.
boys in the Scottish. It's great. Keep him in the job.
But I mean, to be honest, so they've got us on Saturday, and then they've got Ayr United at home on Tuesday night.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is a case of they kind of need a result off of us on Saturday because they've just not. Like, you're right. They're a really funny side because you sort of, for the sake of like simplicity and narrative, you want to go. Like, it's down to Hamilton and Dunfermline. Like they are garbage effectively. Like, can Airdrie catch those two? But then you look at how poor Queen's Park have been recently. Like, wouldn't it take a huge amount for them to be dragged in? But then at the same time, if they beat us and then beat Ayr on Tuesday, you're like, shit, they're favourites to finish fourth.
Guaranteed fourth.
It's such a...
It's a bit like us
Such
going
a
into the
funny
Partick
sight.
game, innit? It's like we said the whole thing about, it's not off. Like, fourth place isn't out the question. Isn't a guarantee rather if you win. But if you lose that Partick game for us, you're like, fourth's done. Like, we're away from it. It kind of feels a bit like that for Queen's Park on Saturday. Like, I'm not sure if it's a 6-pointer for us, but I think it kind of is for them. Like, if they lose on Saturday, you've got to think fourth's a stretch for them. But they win on Saturday, like you say, who knows?
It's just like...
Can we
The
figure
fact
out where
that
Callum
they've-
Ferry lives and light some fireworks outside his house at 3 a.m. or
That's
something?
what I was going to say. Well, not exactly that, but I can't wait for another Callum Ferry masterclass. Like, sick of seeing it.
That is frightening.
It's like somebody has sort of... Oh, by the way, if you've ever heard of Jinx, this is it. Wait for this. But it's like there's been a sort of like monkey's paw style scenario where it's like, right, Callum, you can keep Callum Ferry and you can play him in goal every week. It's like, oh, that's good. It's like, but you have to play only Zach Rudden up front every week. Oh, that's bad. Like the fact that they've gone
Zach Rudden
through...
hat-trick on Saturday then, eh?
That's exactly it.
Well done.
But the fact they've gone through a January and just not picked up another forward. Like, apparently Alex Jakubiak's been sitting waiting for the phone to ring. Like, would have done a job. I was just looking there. It's
Fairhand,
like,
they actually loaned out a striker. They loaned the boy McLeish out to Kelty.
yeah. Because they, against Dunfermline, they brought on Rhys Evans for Zach Rudd. And I was like, I don't recognise the name. Did they bring somebody in January? I didn't notice. No, he's been there all season, just hasn't played.
Yeah. He played. See, this is the thing. You say that. I actually remember him playing against us because I remember genuinely just because I remember looking him up because he came through at Leicester and appears to have just appeared at Queen's Park. He's one of these regens that's just kind of appeared. But is he no the boy that's like he's like 6'3" or something? He's absolutely
He's a
massive.
big guy, aye.
So until 3 weeks ago, he'd only played in 2 games all season. Both games against us.
I was going to say, I'm just having a look there. Yeah, both against us.
He's brought him off the bench to play us twice, and then he's come off the bench the last 3 games. And those are his only league appearances. So maybe he'll start.
It was the game where Dylan Easton got sent off at the end.
So, yeah, difficult to know what to make of Queen's Park, because they've definitely got decent players. They've got, a decent manager under the right circumstances, almost, in Callum Davidson. But they have been on undeniably very, very poor form. And Scott, as you touched upon before, our home form is pretty decent. This is another one where, despite the fact we lost last night, the Rovers should be going into this, in with a fair degree of confidence. They'll not be thinking the game's won by any matter of means at all. But there's no reason to be downhearted going into this. But this does bring us to the point we've been kind of dancing around all evening, which is that there's really not an awful lot of latitude when it comes to making changes. So, we'll do our usual. We'll ring round and get starting 11s, but when I went to do that just before we started, I basically wrote out last night's 11, so the team that's played the last 3 games, and then just kind of gone to the benching leg. Who is a viable, realistic alternative for this? So Sean Byrne could absolutely come into midfield. That's a fair change. I don't think that appreciably makes us any worse if Sean Byrne comes in for Scott Brown or Ross Matthews. These are guys who do similar jobs to a similar level. Like, Aidan Marsh is a striker, and we're playing 2 strikers. I think you could bring him in for Pollock or Gullen. Not a huge body of evidence to be able to say that's an upgrade, but I mean, that's a change you could make. Connolly, we've said, like, naturally, I think, I've said before, I think of Aidan Connolly and Josh Mullen as quite interchangeable in the sense of they play very differently, but to a similar level. I don't think Connolly's well suited at all. He's almost uniquely unsuited to the role we're currently using Josh Mullen in, so I don't really like the idea of that if you stick to the same system. And then it's Montague for Easton, which unfortunately that is a downgrade. So unless Easton's struggling, I don't think that's a change you would want to make. And then you've got Fordyce and Murray. If somebody in defence needs to be freshened up, I don't have any major issues there, but that's not the kind of changes you're kind of looking for. So, sorry, I've just swallowed up all the talking points there.
I agree with all of it.
Actually, I have to tell you, I never finished that exercise. All I've still got is last night's team written down. Blair, where did you come to on this? What are your thoughts?
So, like I said earlier, shy changing the system. For me, the back 3. I mean, he goes with Ray in goals, right? And he goes with the back 3 because, let's be perfectly honest, the back 3 worked a wee bit harder last night than they have done. But the last 2 games, they've been pretty comfortable. I don't think there's a huge amount of tiredness set in. Stevenson at left wing back, again, seems like a bit of a no-brainer. Mullen at right wing back because there's nobody else to play at right wing back. I have put Byrne in for Matthews just because you need to freshen someone up at some point. And then I've put Marsh in for Pollock just because I do wonder if, like, we need to protect Pollock a little bit in terms of he particularly, like, he ran himself into the ground again last night. It was a kind of a fruitless task, just running, like Iain said earlier, running that channel continually, looking for that ball for Josh Mullen. So I do think maybe putting Marsh in from the start and then having Pollock for the last half an hour is probably not a bad place to be coming off the bench if you still want to play that system. But like, I'm not, like, if this is Football Manager, I'm just not going onto the screen where I look at how fit they are. I'm just ignoring it and going with the same. Do you know what I mean? Just like, nah, I'm not changing anything. I'm sticking with the same.
Barry Robson did.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, he's all right, boys. Aye, we're fine, Gaffer. On you go, boys. Like, aye.
Scott, what about you? What are you thinking of this?
I was just kind of nodding along with both what you said and then also what Blair said with his team. I'm also 2 changes, and it's the same change pretty much. It's Byrne for Matthews. I've decided to go Marsh for Gullen, but it could be Pollock as well. I think you've got to change one of them. I think the 2 of them have both played a lot of minutes in recent games. Yeah. Gullen also, we know what his injury history is in terms of straight groin strains, hamstrings, and the fact that he came into us having not played football since basically October. So, I mean, I suppose you could kind of say the last few weeks has kind of been his pre-season, and he's now kind of into his actual season. But I think I would just try and freshen it up and go with Marsh ahead of Gullen. But again, as I just said, it could be Pollock. And then, I mean, I think if you're going for impact off the bench, you possibly would say you would put Pollock on the bench because he gives you a bit more pace, a bit more legs, all that sort of stuff. But I think Gullen also gives you just that little bit better quality in terms of just in front of goal than Pollock. I know Pollock's went on a wee bit of a spree scoring goals, but if you were to say out of the two of them, who are you backing to score for the edge of the box or for 12 yards out, you're probably picking Gullen over Pollock. So it just depends what you want, really, for that game. I don't think... I'm trying to remember who plays centre-half for Queen's Park now, but because they don't have Dane Murray anymore, so I don't think they're relatively slow, so it's not like, we definitely need Pollock to be starting. It's not that sort of thing, but I would be going Marsh and Pollock up front, and I would just give Gullen 25 minutes off the bench, and then he could maybe play against Livy during the week.
I just worry about Marsh and Pollock together. That just feels awfully inexperienced, awfully young.
They also played at Falkirk in the Scottish Cup tie together.
Very true. Yeah, I'll shut my pass. Well done, Scott. It was good.
My only thing with that would be that was like all based on running and like proper harassing, pressing. I don't know if Finlay Pollock's going to have
those
enough
legs
in the tank for that, given that. And I mean, the thing is, well, you mentioned that each of you mentioned that they are both Pollock and Gullen have had injury problems as well. They're not necessarily guys who you would want to be trying to hit 390 minutes in the space of a week. Iain, I want to hear your thoughts on the lineup, but also, do you think there's any chance that Barry Robson does change his shape to try and get slightly more rotation into this? Or do you suspect he's kind of wedded to this now?
So what we'll do is I'll give you my lineup and shape, and that'll answer the second question for you.
Good stuff.
I've gone 3-5-2. I've exactly the same as Blair, actually. Burn for Matthews purely because it's a viable option, not because I think Matthews has done anything particularly wrong in the previous games. Quite the opposite. I think Matthews has really come onto a game.
Yes.
And then I've kept Brown and East in and gone for Gullen and Marsh up front. The only, obviously, as you said, it's a toss of a coin between who we were going to choose there. I've gone for Gullen and Marsh up front purely because I think Gullen might be slightly better foil for Marsh in terms of aerial attributes, ability to hold the ball up, layoffs, flick-ons. If you play Pollock and Marsh, and you do go slightly longer, you almost can't. You can't do that at all. Whereas I think if you go Gullen and Marsh, you've got a bit of both. You can press from the front, but you can also go a bit longer to Gullen, who can then hold it up. So, yeah. I know we changed to 4-4-2 briefly last night. I don't imagine that will be a kind of common thing. You can see straight away, like, you throw Montague on to play 10, within like 4 or 5 minutes he's playing wide left, and you're like, this isn't what he wants to do. I'm sure it's not what Robson wants to do, but as you said earlier, at that point it was like we need to try something.
It's like break glass in case of emergency.
Definitely. Yeah. So I don't imagine we'll do that particularly often. 3-5-2's worked, and I'm reticent to just rip it up, and I'm sure Barry Robson will be at the first sign of failure, given that it has worked so well up until now. 1-0 defeats away from home midweek are going to happen. Let's not rip up everything that we've been doing and been doing well in previous couple of weeks.
The other one that would have made a big difference last night or on Saturday is having Lewis Gibson back.
Yeah.
Just gives you that. But I mean, obviously, he's got all the attributes Barry Robson likes. He's very direct, he's very quick, works very hard. He's also quite versatile as well. You can play him on the left, you can play him on the right. You can basically, especially if you're chasing a game, you can slot him in either wing-back position, and he'll do it, and he'll do the job you need him to do.
So you can also stick him in at 10, you can stick him in up front. He can do all of the above.
He's just going to fill in, especially we're 1-0 down, we've got 10 minutes to go. He'll do any of those jobs. Did not have a good game last time out against Queen's Park, right enough.
No.
Out on that left wing under Collins, where he had a kind of defensive duty that he just did not.
He was not alone in that, though.
Oh no! But that was possibly our worst 45 minutes of the season.
I was going to say,
we went in 1-0 up at half time.
Cohort.
But
I think he was quite unlucky to be playing about 4 yards in front of a barking Neil Collins as well, who did not give him a second's rest. Poor guy, man. He got absolutely bodied for 45 minutes.
We were brutal.
It was the image of him just pointing at the fullback as he ran away. It's like, that's your man.
Yeah, you need to go as well.
Yeah.
Right?
All you're doing is highlighting that he's free at this point.
Connolly played up front against this mob, didn't he? Forgot about that.
He did. It's an option.
It might actually be another option instead of Marsh.
Mugged off Champions League centre half Dane Murray and got us that goal.
Champions League centre half. Jesus
I don't know
Christ.
if should have played the Champions League or not, but he was in a couple of matchday squads. It's very interesting to see, because actually almost to the opposite of what you were saying, Blair, about just sort of ignoring kind of the fitness side of things altogether. That might be the thing that we don't see that might inform the starting lineup, is actually taking the opposite approach and go, basically, right, who is the most shattered, and working backwards from there. So if this guy needs to be replaced, how do you then work it back together? But certainly if we could get Lewis Gibson back involved in the squad, George Guteau as well would be nice, just to see if he can get back in. Again, that's another option. We'll see. And so another one that's should be
Lewis
quite...
as well. Lewis Vaughan loves a goal against Queen's Park. What a way to come back.
I was kind of leaving that unsaid. I'm really just whatever the opposite of trying to will it into existence is. Just like try and notice it in case, like, if you say it too much, it'll just disappear or whatever. Like, we get too excited the last time because we got the tiny little I said this before. We keep getting like increasingly close long lens shots of Lewis Vaughan doing keepy uppies. And it felt like
the number 10 on the pair of shorts sitting in the changing room.
I was convinced, I was absolutely convinced. I was all in. Devastated when the team line came out at 2:00.
Like 6 weeks ago, so I thought of him wearing like jeans, and then he's in trackies. Like, oh, hang on, he's getting closer. He's changed out his mould. He's into proper studs. This is an imminent return. We'll see. That obviously will be a huge lift, whether it's this week or next week or the week after. That will be absolutely massive. And again, it quite simply has been the biggest miss through large chunks of this season.
100%.
There's that very, very unique ability to create goals for himself that we don't have amongst our other forwards, really. We'll see what that brings. Remember as well, as Carol was keeping us up to date with on the last episode, it is International Women's Day on Saturday, and there's been a huge amount of effort going into a load of different activities and events and everything of that nature in and around Starks Park on Saturday. And I think Alan's been working up a special playlist for it as well. So there's, by the way, not to equate the two efforts, Alan's been on Spotify for 20 minutes. Carol's been knocking her pan in alongside about 7 other people for weeks. Anyway, so there'll be loads of that kind of stuff. So you'll see all that going on through the afternoon. I think there's quite a lot of social media stuff to come up as well. Thank you for joining us for this episode. We will be back at the weekend, whatever happens on Saturday, and we'll speak to you again then. Thank you and goodbye.